You're listening to Faith Connections Podcast, where we are dedicated to connecting you to your faith. And now your hosts, Chris and Mari Torres.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to Faith Connections. It is Tuesday. We are excited that you have joined us this afternoon. Man, last week we had a pretty awesome conversation. We ended our 3-part series of Control, Alt, Delete, and we're just going to continue to talk about different things that are important. Today, we're going to be talking about triggers. When you think about past traumatic events, things that we've experienced, I don't think we realize that even though we come and face them or try to overcome them, whether it's through therapy, getting connected to the faith, counseling, there's things that can trigger those moments to arise and to kind of, come back to life in a way. And those triggers take us back. They take us back to those moments, to those experiences, to those situations. And we have to be aware of those triggers, right? And so a trigger is a stimulus that elicits a reaction. And that's really what it is. It's something that affects us emotionally. And so that's what causes that for us to be triggered, depending on our situation. It often significantly causes extreme distress, overwhelmness, anxiety, sadness, depression.
Just an array of emotions.
And it could lead to us falling back into some of those old behaviors or habits or mental health issues that we're dealing with. Right. It kind of takes us back. As we feel like we're taking steps to move forward and man, we're feeling great, those triggers can lead us back to square one.
It's a bump in the road, per se.
Bump in the road.
It can be a bump in the road, but if we trip and fall, some of us don't get back up. And that's what we're trying to prevent here, is that it's okay to trip up and fall. It's what you do next, and it's the point of getting back up.
Yeah.
And what we're going to discuss here today, and hopefully is just bring awareness and also to dissect it a little bit more. That's why it's called triggers. What triggers us? What triggers a certain reaction from you, right? You just gave the definition.
A trigger affects the ability for us to be able to remain in the moment. And that's why I said it kind of takes us back. It may bring up specific thought patterns or influences our behaviors, depending on what it is.
Yep. I just want to take notice that you're wearing a hat. So thank you for wearing a hat today. She finally got her to, hey, it's okay to come on the show and let loose a little bit, right? And
I was off today, so I didn't have to dress up for work.
Yeah, so she's wearing a hat. So welcome to the club. So I just had to bring that up before.
I'm not dressed up.
Hopefully nobody's triggered by her wearing a hat and dressing down a little bit, because they're used to seeing you dressed up every Tuesday.
I know, right?
So,
what type of triggers? What are the different types of triggers? And there's 3. Some of them are categorized. There's a little bit of a difference because sometimes they're just external and internal. When you think about psychologists, right? It's just internal and external. Sometimes they divide internal, external, and they also have sensory. And so they kind of separate the 5 senses, and we'll talk about that. But let's start with external trigger. Those are triggers that are caused by people, places, things. So
things around us.
Our environment can cause it. It could be what we're watching. It could be, anything that somebody says to us. Maybe it's something that we saw, or maybe we go and visit a place and all of a sudden it brings back a memory, or, maybe you go back to that same place of trauma or of a situation that you experienced that just was not a good place. And so it brings you back memories, right? When you think about not just going into the different places, but it's just sometimes it's things. Maybe you see something, a picture or a toy or an object, and it kind of brings you back because it reminds you of a specific person. And so though that would be considered an external trigger.
Right.
It's something externally. So remember, it's people, places, and things. That's an external trigger. The other trigger is an internal trigger. Internal trigger. And those are internally our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts. They can be things like, maybe we, are feeling some sort of way about something. Maybe something comes into our minds, and it could also be triggered simultaneously by being somewhere externally that leads into internal. So they kind of also go hand in hand depending on, they overlap depending on the situation. Maybe, you're having a conversation with somebody and somebody shares something with you that can
make you feel a certain way and takes you back to a place of where you experience something similar.
And it can be unintentional. They didn't realize that happened. And the other one is sensory. And so sensory triggers are related to the senses, right? Sight, sound, taste, and touch. Maybe you smelled a cologne, a perfume, or a food, a baked good that just took you back to a moment in time, or whenever you're like, oh, that reminds me of when I was little, right? When you hear a song, or when somebody's baking cookies, or whatever the case may be, it can take you back to when you were young, or a time in your life that you recall.
Right. So with triggers, the basic question to ask yourself is, what sets me off, or what's setting me off? And a follow-up question is, what work still has to be done in order for me to get past that? We're talking about undealt trauma, right? We're specifically trauma. What's triggering me to have this emotion, to have this reaction, to have this. So I found that there's 5 steps to manage emotional triggers, right? Because what it's doing is, you said, is eliciting a reaction from us.
Yeah.
Whether we're going to be angry, sad, anxious, fearful. Fear. There's different things that might, like, me that suffers from PTSD, crowded, being in a crowded area is going to trigger my PTSD. I get anxiety because I'm surrounded. I don't have my space. And the reason for that is because when we were in combat, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, when we had to convoy, we owned the road. We had to clear space. Why? Because we never knew when the enemy can try to sneak in, car bomb, or throw a hand grenade into the Humvee that we were parked at. Whatever the case may be, they would sneak up attack. We needed to have our space so we can see 360 all the way around us. All eyes everywhere, right? Head was always in a swivel.
Yeah.
When it's compressed and crowded, I can then become what's the word I'm looking for? When you're confined to a small space.
Claustrophobic.
Claustrophobic is the word. Sorry, it eluded my mind here. But being claustrophobic, right? That immediately triggers my anxiety, my stress levels, and maybe my blood pressure, and it's a trickle effect of reactions. But 5 steps to manage your emotional triggers is recognize your emotional reaction. Recognize it first. What is it? What is it? Is it this? Because sometimes we don't even know, and that's the little bit. I think in my opinion, it's a little bit more alarming because you don't know what set it off. You don't know what caused this reaction.
Yeah, that's a big one. And you can attest to this, but I'm going to share it. And this is just my personal experience. But I know I've been sharing a lot about my journey, right, to healing, my healing journey. And so was it not last week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, a week ago.
2 weeks ago, I was off. I had a day off during the week, and all of a sudden I started feeling anxiety, and I started feeling like, man, that depression is starting to creep up. And I mean, it started freaking me out. And I remember calling you, and I'm like, I feel like I'm getting anxiety. I don't know where it's coming from. Just, all these different things. And
what did I do? I immediately started asking questions.
Yes.
Because I wanted to help you pinpoint what caused it.
You know, so I remember speaking to you. I called another close friend of mine, and they said something that helped me identify the trigger. And so the weekend before, I think this was on a Wednesday. So the weekend before, my mom was here visiting, and she was down. You know, she was down, and so she shared that, you know, she was crying, and she had a dream about my brother who passed away. And, you know, so she was crying. And so I was just, you know, we were just comforting her and, you know, lifting her up and, you know, being there for her. I didn't realize that that was a trigger for me. And it was a trigger because it was something that caused trauma in my life, in my childhood. But I didn't think anything of it. It was just like, okay, you know, she's feeling this way. Let me just console her, be there for her, encourage her, lift her up, went on her way. And then all of a sudden it was a trigger for me because it created, right, those feelings, all of that for me to kind of take a step back and for all that to kind of come to, you know, fruition, just come to the forefront of my emotions and my feelings and causing anxiety and, you know, freaking out. And I didn't know. And I could just start feeling that just depression of sadness. And so that's important because you might not realize the triggers that bring those emotions to light for you. And so you have to be able to recognize what are the triggers. And so when you start feeling that way, you start trying to figure out what could have caused it. Was it my environment? Was it what I was watching? Because it could be even TV that you're watching that maybe triggers depending, you know, is it making your heart, you know, raise, palpitate? What was it? And trying to identify what it is.
Right. And like you said, you hit on a lot of things. So one of the first step here is just to recognize. The second step is to accept responsibility for your reaction because it's going to elicit a reaction. So now, okay, I'm reacting this way. So you're accepting responsibility of why I'm reacting this way. It's just being a responsible because and once I go through all 5 steps, you're going to realize and you're going to see it's to help us put ourselves in a better position down the road, right? It's going to help us. Everything's to alleviate. The third step is to identify the emotion attached to your response. What emotion did I feel at that moment? In your situation, you felt a little bit of anxiety, depression, so sadness, right? So anxiety and sadness, they kind of they overlapped in this situation. So there you're identifying that emotion of what triggered. So now you identified your trigger, and now you're identifying that emotion, right? And then determine who or what triggered that emotion, right? So that kind of correlates also with recognizing, determine the who or what.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, it wasn't intentional.
Right, it wasn't.
I mean, some of these situations, it might be intentional. There's people in your lives that maybe you need to remove yourself, right? Depending on what they're doing or what they're causing. Maybe it's an abusive relationship. So the abuser always being in your life is going to take you back to that same place of trauma or whatever the case may be. In this case, it's unintentional.
Right.
And
who it was your mother.
It was
and
my
what
mom,
was
and
it? It was the fact that y'all both share in the loss. It's her son, and yours is your brother.
Yes.
So,
and I think too, it's, you know, one thing that I realized was it was a trigger for me because when he did pass, I was still here having to witness her suffering. Right. So, and every year, and I never understood why every year it was right. You know, it was a season, right? Right before he passed, and it would last for months. You know, at least a good quarter where she would just go into a deep depression. It was always right before he passed. And then you have the next month, that's his birthday. And sometimes it would lead until May, Mother's Day, right? So you're talking about March, April, May, and I couldn't understand, I understood, okay, why? But I was like, why is it lasting so long? But it's because it was a trigger for her, a season where 3 important months, the month he passed away, the month that he was born, and then Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And it didn't hit me until I kind of connected that.
Yeah, and when we start diving into and learning about this that we're talking about now, you start pinpointing your own stuff and recognizing and identifying, right? And then number 4 was determine the who and the what. In this situation, who is your mother? What was it? Is the fact that y'all both lost a loved one, her son and your brother, and then the last one is choose how you want to feel or what you want to do at this point. And in your situation, I think you're choosing to, because you have Christ in your life, and because you have you've spoken to me several times that you have peace now. You're at peace.
Yeah.
So therefore now it's just getting your mom, and I think she's come a long way too, because now
Absolutely.
we're not,
She doesn't go through months
right.
at a
We're
time.
not seeing that no more. She's slowly. It's a process.
It is.
and it's gonna take time.
It
but
is.
we have seen her going from 3 months of dealing with depression, anxiety, and stress, and all that
Every year around the same time.
Yes,
Every
and
year.
it's gonna,
Never
and
failed.
it's probably gonna
and
keep
now
happening.
it's lessened and lessened
Yes, it
and
is.
lessened and lessened because you acknowledge it, you understand it, you have your support system.
That's right.
You know when to seek help, right? And,
Yes.
and you help distract yourself. And I think it's choosing, okay, where do I go from here? And so this was my first trigger. I don't remember ever being triggered and taking me back.
Right.
And so what I did is I was like, okay, what am I doing? Right. What is it that I'm doing now? I remember I was watching a Netflix show, right? And I was like, okay, my mom came in and this is what triggered me. I need to do the opposite. That's the first
right.
thing we talked about. And so what I did is no more TV. I couldn't, I'm going to kind of put that in the back burner. I need to get into the Word of God. I need to go into continuous prayer.
Right.
And I need to go be one with God. And what I mean one with God is one in nature with God. Bike rides, just, right? We've been talking a lot about the different things to help us
Cope with stuff.
cope with different things. One of them is exercise or just taking a walk, being outside. And that's exactly what I did. I did the opposite of what I was doing within the moment.
Right.
And I don't remember ever in my entire life overcoming that so quickly. I mean, you're talking about it lasted 2 days.
24
the day that
hours,
it started,
48, yes.
by the next day, man, by that next third day, I was like, I felt good.
Right.
I felt at peace again. There was no anxiety. There was no depression. There was none of that. And I want to just share 2 scriptures really quick. Colossians 3:15, it says, and let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. Rule in your hearts. And that's what I wanted. I wanted his peace. And how do I get his peace is to seeking him in every form, shape that I could. And that was his word. That was prayer. And that was being one in nature with him. And that was just stepping out and just breathing the air that he gives us, right? Looking at his beautiful creation and putting my focus on him. 2 Thessalonians 3:16 says, now may the Lord of peace himself give you his peace at all times and in every situation. The only person that can give you peace is
God, Jesus Christ.
God, is
and
Jesus.
it's amazing that you bring those 2 scriptures, but our minds were in the same. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, she does a little bit of studying, I do a little bit of studying, and then we come together in preparation for these podcasts. I did not know what scriptures that she was going to read, but John 14:27, I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. And again, in all these 3 scriptures, what is a common denominator there? The common analogy is our Lord Jesus Christ. Come to Christ, come to Jesus Christ, and he's going to give you that peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that the world cannot give.
Yes.
And many times we search for clues or ideas or things to get us out of this funk.
Yeah.
But Jesus Christ is the only one that can get us out of this funk. And in this situation, you did other little exercises that can help you. But the key one that you just mentioned was you went and got in his word. You got one with God. You just mentioned that. Getting in his word, getting with God, right? So you're turning your attention from whatever that trigger was and turning it into something positive.
You change your atmosphere.
Change.
And that's what I did. When you think about what is your atmosphere, it's
What's around
what's
you.
around you. I changed me being in here by myself, because I was by myself when it started, when it happened. Nobody was home. Kids were at school. You were at work, right? And so I changed my atmosphere.
That's right.
I went from
Being in the couch.
being in the couch to watching TV, having my phone to, you know what? I'm gonna take a break from my phone. Not even gonna be on it. I'm not gonna watch TV. I'm gonna get into His Word. I'm gonna go into prayer, and I'm gonna go outside.
Yeah, there you go.
You know.
So I found a little worksheet that had. I kind of shared it with you before coming on live, but coping strategies, right? And I told you, man, there's like they have a worksheet with 62 coping strategies to help you deal with triggers, things that trigger you with undealt trauma. And as I read through the list, it's random stuff from just chewing gum, play with a toy or color, or just random stuff, right? Because this is also directed for little kids as well. So they have different things. Read a joke book, right? It's just random stuff.
Yeah.
But what did
I wrote on my prayer journal, so that helped too.
that help? Okay, writing things down,
yes.
getting
I
those
wrote on my
thoughts,
prayer.
your feelings and so forth out. Good. So there's 62, right? And I can only imagine this is only scratching the surface. There's probably 100 or thousands of things that you. But the common analogy on all these things is do something else other than what's triggering you. So that means removing yourself from this environment and putting yourself in another environment. And that's all you got to do. It's that simple. Is sometimes looking at, recognizing, accepting, identifying, determine, and choose to do something different.
Can you repeat those? The beginning of words. You said recognize,
accept,
identify,
determine, and then choose.
choose.
You choose to do something else. Those
like
are the 5 steps.
5 keywords.
And how to deal with triggers, with things that trigger you.
Yes.
We see a lot of videos and we laugh, but we call them Karens, right? Karens can trigger us, whether we're at the store, at Walmart, or whatever, right? And we laugh about it.
Don't be a Karen.
But don't be a Karen. Don't be that one person triggering people. But if you're the one being triggered by a Karen, just remove yourself from the situation. Guess what? I'm gonna go to the next aisle. I'll come back to this aisle later, and just get away from the Karen.
But what do you typically see people do?
They start following, or they stay there because ego, and they want to hold the ground and they want to prove their point. And then before you know it, things escalate and they get out of control. And before you know it, 2 people are triggered because one's angry and the other one is just mad at the world for whatever reason.
Change your atmosphere.
And change your environment.
Change your atmosphere.
How many Christians go to church and receive a message and they're in the spirit as soon as they walk out of church, and they're driving back home or walking to the restaurant, driving to the restaurant that they're going to go eat after church, and they all of a sudden they're stuck in traffic, or there's it goes from being a 2-lane road to 1 lane because of construction or something, and there you go. Now you allow anger to set in, and you're triggered by road construction, and you're triggered by traffic, and you clench the wheel, and stress goes up, anxiety, you're yelling at the kids to be quiet in the back, and you're honking at drivers and then flicking them off, and you just left church. Easily can we get triggered, but again, change your environment. There's many things, and I said that was just 62 little things, from simple as chewing gum, color in a coloring book. You said you wrote in a journal, and you wrote in a prayer journal, and you read the Bible. So you immediately changed. Those were 2 different things that you did.
Outside.
And within 48 hours, you're like, no way, Jose, I'm not allowing depression or anxiety to hang around.
Take control.
Boom. Delete.
Control Alt Delete really helped me, because I was like, nope.
Yep.
And so this happens for a reason, right? We're having these conversations for a reason, because here's the thing. You can sit here and listen to this podcast, right? You can listen to these podcasts and you're like, okay, I can relate to this. But if we're not applying them.
That's right.
And so we're here and we're the ones sharing these things with you, but we ourselves are applying them to our lives, because God speaks to us through these messages, through the podcast itself. And so I had to, no, you're going to take control. You're not going to allow it to take control of you. I'm going to take control. I'm going to alter the way I think. I'm going to delete the negativity. I'm going to delete anxiety, delete depression, delete whatever is trying to overcome.
So recognize, accept, identify, determine, and choose. You chose a different route.
Yes.
You choose to go somewhere else, and Jesus Christ laid it all out in the Gospels. It's in His Word. It's the playbook for life.
It is.
So that my name could be in that book of life. So He gives us the playbook. Here it is. Go play it out. Go play out life. I'll see you at the end. And we know who wins at the end. I'll be waiting because we already have victory. So just go play out life. And So we have to choose. And again, we at the beginning of this podcast, we said that, dealing with trauma is not going to happen overnight. Yeah. It's a journey. It's a step by step, little increments, little baby steps. But get the help. Reach out. Do these things that we're talking about. Get in His Word. Come to church. Seek out a counselor. Seek out a therapist. Do whatever it is, but choose something different. Mm-hmm. Choose to get better and allow that journey to take its course. And I know you've come a long way with dealing with this, because I know me and you have talked about it, that you realize that you never really truly had time to grieve for your brother because you had to help your parents prepare for the funeral because you were speaking English and your parents were still not very fluent in English. So you had to do all the phone calls and preparations and do a lot of things. So you didn't have time to grieve. You immediately were put that responsibilities. Hey, you got to prep these things for the family and get going and making phone calls and get this and go to the bank and get signatures and do whatever it takes to prepare for a funeral. Yeah. But you were responsible at a very young age that you were not allowed to grieve. And unfortunately, that has played out.
Too, the way I found out, right? So when I found out that my brother had passed away, it was through my mom. And so I could see how that's a trigger because I was deep sleep and I could just hear her yelling, screaming, and my door was open. And so that's what woke me up. And so I think that's why it was a trigger because she wasn't yelling, screaming here, but she was crying and she was talking about him. And so it's almost like that. You're
reliving that moment.
Yeah, it took me back. And so that's what we mean by triggers is those things might happen and we have to recognize, we have to be cognizant, we have to be aware of what they are then follow those 5 things. Can you just repeat them because it's so important? So recognize,
you accept, you identify, and you determine, and you choose.
Yes. So identify, recognize what those triggers are, and follow these key steps to help you overcome them, right? You can overcome them and follow through with how we're applying this to our lives, right? Take control, alter the way you think, delete the negativity, but choose to change your atmosphere, do something differently so that you're able to overcome those triggers and you don't allow it to take control of your life.
That's right.
Can I get an amen?
Amen to that, sis.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to Faith Connections, where we connect you to your faith.